Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I was just analyzing one line in the Caro-Kann advanced variation and came across a very interesting and rare idea, which already after like 7 moves, there are almost no games there. So I thought I would show it to you since some of you might be Caro-Kann players, both from the white and black side. This could be a pretty interesting idea. So the line I'm talking about is in the advanced variation with bishop f5, h4, h5, and now the move c4 here, which I would say nowadays has become some sort of main line by itself. And I was personally struggling quite a bit, usually with those positions, and it was one of the reasons I stopped playing the Caro-Kann for quite a while now. Because in general, in those structures, what I don't really like is that all of the squares on the king side are weak. The h5 pawn can often be attacked with bishop e2. And after c4 specifically, the positions are, not very easy for black because white has all sorts of ideas. Usually black goes e6 here, knight c3, then white has ideas with knight e2, knight g3, often threatening to pick up the h5 pawn. And while I analyzed this quite extensively already many years ago, I do not fully feel those positions, and white is usually very well prepared here. That doesn't mean that this line is bad for black. Just as a matter of taste, it can be quite difficult sometimes. There is also, by the way, the move bishop d3. However, here, first of all, there's also the interesting move queen d7, which I've covered on my YouTube channel during the Metropa Cup as well. I'll put an info card right here. And also those positions, while they can be tricky, at least you got rid of the usual problem, the light squared bishop. So let's go to move c4. Now, what do I want to show you? The move knight a6. This is still quite a rare move. Let me just quickly open up the online database. Here we have more than 4,000 games, and after knight a6, there are 7 games. I originally came across this line from Jan Schubey. Hopefully that was correctly pronounced. Who I'm also playing in the team in the German Bundesliga with for FC Bayern Munich. And in general, he has very interesting opening ideas. I came across many of him in the past. And the move itself is already tricky because if you're playing this in an online game and white is pre-moving the move knight c3 here, they could actually lose immediately because of knight b4. And white cannot stop the threat knight c2. Okay, obviously this is most likely not going to happen in many games. What else can white do? C takes d5. I didn't even look at this move before, but I guess it will also run into knight b4 when knight c2 is a big threat, and otherwise in the worst case then if white goes for something like knight a3, I guess that black can take back and the knight on a3 is horribly misplaced. Bishop d3 was also played, I think, in 2 games, but now black can take on c4 and go queen d5, and if someone is better, it should be black in this endgame. This is exactly what every Caro-Kann player is dreaming of. So what about a3? This stops knight b4, and it is the only critical move in the position. Now the idea is to go knight c7. White should go for knight c3, which is quite natural. And here, very recently, just a couple of days ago, Schubey played the move e6, which is interesting. In the past, I only looked at the move d takes c4, bishop takes e4, and now e6, which is also interesting. But now at least white gets this sort of typical position. They can play knight e2, possibly knight g3. I think there was a game by the Israeli grandmaster Ido Gorstein here. And while this is also interesting, I think that e6 holds perhaps even more practical value. Because in this position, white, as far as I could see, only has one really critical move, which is not very typical for this line. It's the move c5. And usually white doesn't really go for this in those positions, in this specific line. Here it works fairly well because now the knight on c7 is a little bit misplaced. Usually if the knight is on d7, then black can quickly break with the moves b6 and a5 much easier. Here I think that b6 can simply be answered by b4, and a5 probably doesn't work well because white can just take on b6. Other moves for white are not critical. Queen b3 can be answered by rook b8. Knight f3, often white doesn't really want to have the knight here anyway. Now black could take and develop, for example, in this fashion, and later on usually one important black idea is bishop g4 to pin the knight on f3. There was also one game of Schuberi before that, who played it against Lukas Dotzer from Austria. And Lukas went for the move knight ge2. That was a rapid game in the Open Austrian Rapid Championship just a few months ago. Here, however, black can take on c4, and after knight g3, hang on to the pawn on c4 by going b5. And this specific game actually ended in black's favor. Black won pretty quickly here. Even though white should probably still have enough compensation, it's not so easy to prove that over the board. Bishop d3 again should be answered by d takes c4. Now, compared to some of the main lines where black usually takes on c4 anyway, white has lost a valuable tempo by moving the bishop twice. And black again can play knight h6, then bishop e7. And for example, queen d7, possibly followed by queenside castle here. Black gets a very good version. So the only critical move is c5. And I'm not going to lie to you here, black is not equalizing in many lines. But at the same time, the position is very unstandard. White is definitely not going to analyze this, at least if you play it for one game. And still, there's a lot of ideas hidden in the position. So bishop e7 should be played. Now, the logical move is g3, which was also played now in the game I'm actually showing you of Jan Schuberi, who played it in the Granada Chess Open a few days ago. And now f6 was played. If white starts with knight f3, black can go knight h6, and most likely it is anyway going to transpose with black having the idea of going f6 next. So g3, f6. White played the move knight f3. First of all, f4 would be a grave mistake for white because it weakens all of the squares. Black can go bishop g4, then knight h6, knight f5. So here black is actually taking over the initiative immediately. Bishop f4 would be another move which white could go for, which is actually not bad. Now black could take on e5, go bishop f6, and then again this same idea, knight h6, knight f7. This is also not fully equalizing probably for black, but you know, if you look at the position, it certainly does look playable. Obviously there is a lot of strategical risk. If white can occupy the e5 square forever, then black is going to be strategically lost. But if knight f7 or even knight g4 is going to come, it's at least doesn't look entirely easy for white how to hold the e5 square. Also, maybe knight f7 could be a bit more precise sometimes to keep the option of going bishop g4 to fight even more over the e5 square. So knight f3 was played in their game. Knight h6 again is the key idea, and white took on h6 in this game. Otherwise, black could continue with knight f7 or bishop g4 to fight over the e5 square. So white took. And in the game, white played the move bishop h3. I should also mention that I'm pretty sure that white has prepared this line with c5. Otherwise, I'm not sure that it's such an obvious move. But since Jan already had one game previously, I'm guessing that his opponent at least prepared a couple of moves here. But already at this point, white played the move bishop h3, which actually allowed black to get an equal position with the move bishop g4. This would have been very strong to pin the knight on f3. In the game, Jan played the move bishop e4, but now after taking bishop g2, queen e7, white took on e4. And even though black was up a pawn in the very end, white had a large advantage because the king on e8 is very weak, and the opposite color bishops also favor white here due to the better attacking chances. Also e6 is quite weak. But bishop g4 would have probably been enough for equality. If white takes on g4 and goes knight d2, for example, then black could take on e5 and go for g5. And often king d7 is also one idea to get the king to actually quite a nice safety, and then all of the heavy pieces are also joining the game. If knight h2 here, I did not analyze this at this point, but I'm guessing that black can now go for f5, and then the knight on h2 is pretty misplaced, and black could also here think about going g5 quickly. There are also other interesting ideas here. If white doesn't go for bishop h3, if white goes for bishop e2, for example, then the idea king d7 seems to be quite smart. In the worst case, what you can also do in many positions is just to bring the king to g8. But here, since white did not play b4 just yet, it seems like black is in time here. After b4, there's this very deep move queen h8, which I had some trouble to understand at first. the idea seems to be that bishop g4 is a desirable move, but after e takes f6 here, bishop takes f3 doesn't work because of this intermediate move, taking on e7. And the queen on h8 has some ideas to facilitate the push g5 in the near future. For example, after b5 now, then bishop g4 works. And if e takes f6 now, black can take on f3, and taking on e7 does not come with an attack on the queen on d8 now. And if white would take here, then I could take back, and then there's going to be a lot of pressure on the d4 pawn, for example. Bishop f6 could be played, or maybe even bishop takes c5 now concretely could work as well. So what I looked at here is if white takes back, then bishop takes f6, and also here g5 seems to be coming on the next move. Maybe the most critical move in the position is for white to start with b4, which does make some sense, but to me it looks more natural to finish the development first. Now king d7 could run into a quick attack for white with b5 coming quickly, even though also here it's not clear that white can actually punish this immediately. The best is probably here, since white has started with b4 already, to go for this plan, king f8, king g8, and then queen f8, again with the idea of bishop g4 coming next, and then to fight over e5. We see in all of these lines that the knight on c7 is the biggest problem for black, and this is also what makes the c5 push very strong for white. But still, as we've seen from all of the lines, I think the line holds a lot of practical value, and considering there are only like 7 games even from this position, I think it's quite an interesting practical try. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video, especially if you're a Caro-Kann player. Let me know if you have success with it in your games. If you want to see more of me, if you want to support me, make sure to check out the video description down below. Also, if you want to see more opening ideas like this, you can become a YouTube member, where I publish one video like this just in 1 hour depth per month. So thank you guys, and I'll see you soon.